Hello, everybody, and welcome to Homestead for a Living. We're doing the first of what will hopefully be a lot of these interview series where we find people who are doing really cool things in the regenerative agriculture space or who are just creating solutions right now. And so this is CJ Connell, and he is a regenerative farmer and a researcher. He's living in Oregon right now, and he's got some really cool things he's doing in the world of coming up with solutions for people who may not have access to land or may just want to live a more mobile lifestyle, but still do agriculture. So I don't really want to explain too much because he's going to tell everything he's up to far better than I.
Thanks, Matt. I want to thank you for contacting me. I think what you guys are doing is great. I was a stockbroker with Morgan Stanley. I got very unhappy with the direction of where it was going. I retired at age 50, and I reverted back to my education, which was plant science. And I didn't own land. I didn't necessarily want to own land in Oregon. Oregon has a lot of problems. But I wanted to have a greenhouse. So I built a greenhouse on a trailer.
And that's
tall.
Right now, right?
Well, no, this is another greenhouse I built.
Okay.
The greenhouse on the trailer is, I called it, it's vertical. So it's 10 feet tall. It's squared off. It's not a gable roof. It's squared off. So I can have vertical plantings right up to the top.
Cool.
Now, I ended up landing a great opportunity where I rented the old hand house on a big horse ranch that's at the urban growth boundary of Redmond, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a plot of land that I'm allowed to farm on. It's 18 acres, but most of it was pasture for cattle and horses. But there's a spot that they let me plant on, and it doesn't have the best soil. So last year, I went out and bought 54 chickens. It's a lot of chickens. I had never been close to chicken other than the fettuccine kind.
My favorite.
Yeah, mine too. I bought layers, one couple of roosters. One of them didn't turn out to be a rooster. So I ended up with one rooster, a Jersey Giant, and I sold most of the birds off. But I got all that chicken manure, and I built myself about 1.5 tons of compost, because they went from cattle grazing to cutting the wheat, to cutting the hay. And whatever doesn't make it into the baler is free for me to take.
Awesome.
So it was a nice deal. I ended up with 3.5, 4 truckloads of hay to go with all my manure and the wood chip bedding. I saw your wood chip, your sawdust video. Nice. Yeah. So I have wood chips filled with chicken manure, expertly mixed together by the chickens themselves.
Awesome.
So all that over the past winter turned into a great base for soil. As I've gone along, I've developed this concept of farming at the urban growth boundary. I'm on 18 acres, but it's part of a 160-acre development project. Part of it's being worked as a cattle ranch. My view, actually, from my area is overlooking about a herd of 40. And then he brings on, he calves them each year, and I've learned an awful lot about the animal part of farming and ranching. The point is, the developers had to assemble all that property over a period of years. In fact, over a decade. They assembled the property, and then they started annexing portions of it into the city. And across the street from me, they're developing right now 400 homes. Having the farmers like the fellow that's doing the ranching with the cattle, and me, and the fellow that lives here, the developer himself happens to be a rancher.
Mhm.
So he is managing the property, but most developments are managed by people in suits and ties and big buildings, especially in the larger cities. So being a transient farmer gives a great opportunity for the person who's the transient. Maybe you're just out of high school or just out of college, or a new family starting out, or empty nesters. In my case, a retiree. Yeah, I'm transitioning. I shouldn't use transient. I should say transitioning. So for me, and I think for a lot of people, especially if you don't have the money to go out and buy your perfect 20, and you're not necessarily in the spot where you want to be, and you're looking around and you're young and you anticipate moving around, building your buildings, your farm structures on trailers makes a whole lot of sense. I'm also in an area where it burns. I mean, you're from out here, I understand, Matt.
Burns down every year.
And it burns.
And out. That's an amazing side benefit.
Yeah, if something, God forbid, is threatening my farm, I hitch it up and I save my animals and I save my buildings. And it's a matter of just in the morning.
That could be applicable to other issues too, because like here in the South, you know, wildfires aren't nearly as big of a problem, but there are any number of problems that could prop up. You know, you see the tornado coming or a big wave of them coming, and you're like, you know what, this is a good weekend for me to go somewhere else. Or if you're facing issues with, you know, political instability or anything like that, like the ability to be mobile, I think is just phenomenal.
I think it's really important, especially in this day and age, and especially if you're in transition. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the political issue. Frankly, Oregon has political issues.
Yeah, severe.
Now, I landed on a great spot of land, but housing out here is horrible for people. Horrible. If you own the housing, it's great for you. Yeah. Went up 20% last year. But if you're looking to get into housing, it's horrible. So being able to build my farm structures, like my chicken coops on a trailer, my greenhouse, the tall ones on a trailer, and then now I'm standing inside of my greenhouse that's on my pickup truck.
I just love that.
And this is great. Now, with the trailers and the chicken coop, they're not moving every day. In fact, they've been stable. They've been where they are for a year. It's the ability that after my time here, maybe another 2 years, I can pick the whole thing up and move to the next urban growth boundary development zone.
Which also keeps you right there on the edge of where the population is and where you're going to be able to sell your things at an increased price, because obviously you're working with smaller spaces. So having access to these markets where obviously I can sell vegetables for far more in the city than I can in the country or any product really. And so it just kind of naturally keeps you with that ability to stay right at the edge, like I said, of that urban growth boundary. And just real quick for folks, not everyone might not know what that means, because here in the South, that's not really a thing, the urban growth boundary. That's more of a Western US thing. Like we sort of have that here, but over there where there's like a lot more zoning, a lot more regulation, they define like, okay, this area can be developed and the rest of it cannot. It's a little more almost of like a European kind of Agenda 21-ish, 2030 model where it's like, development is much more directed, whereas out here it's a little bit more like still a little bit more of a free-for-all with development. But on the other hand, there's like, so urban growth boundary is like government defines it there, but it also naturally happens places like here. You know, you've got the area that's going to develop inevitably. You can kind of look at any given city. Like I can look at Nashville and say, I can look at the topography map on Google and say, all right, that's all the flat land. That's where the development is going to happen. And you can go see that happening. You can see right now just tons of developments happening where in our part, we're just as close as some of those other areas to Nashville, but it's more hilly and not suited for development. So I think that model of urban growth boundary, even if they don't officially have urban growth boundaries, that could still apply anywhere across the US or anywhere else, really.
I didn't I've been out here so long, even though I'm from the East Coast. I've been out here so long. I thought everybody was doing it like this. That's out here. They define. Here's the city. Here's the town, and here's where it's going to grow. And then that's where the developers come in and assemble the packages. And it takes decades. I mean, they're working on the 2050 plan now.
Yeah.
So it's really great from the point of view that you just mentioned, which is I'm right there at the city.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not in a big city. Redmond, Oregon is not a big city, but I'm only 3 miles from downtown. 5 minutes. So having my pickup truck with a greenhouse on it, I keep meeting people that I meet away from my vehicle, and I say, I have a greenhouse on my pickup truck. You want to see a picture? I show them a picture, and they say, oh, I've seen that around town.
It's a great marketing tool too, because like, who's not going to see?
Absolutely.
Do people just approach you when you're driving around in it and ask about it?
People give me the thumbs up. People stare. Some people totally try to avoid it because they don't like creativity.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, a lot of kids do, clap. Yeah. When I'm in the parking lots, that's where the opportunity is. People are staring at the greenhouses. I'm walking up to the truck and I say, it's a greenhouse. What do you think? So I'm able to broach the subject. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the higher value crops. I'm going to focus on herbs. I'm also growing vegetables, primarily like peas and carrots, rainbow carrots, purple peas, because that's what the restaurants like.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the customers like, so therefore the restaurants like them. Mm-hmm. I'm also focusing on herbs. And what I do, let me try and turn this around. There it is. You got all these buttons. Then they move the buttons around. Walmart here in town moved everything around, okay? They redid the whole styling of the place so things are not where they used to be. I think they should have to pay a fee to old people to do that.
That sounds fair.
Okay, so you can see here in the greenhouse, I'm growing. This is another part of what I'm doing different. I'm growing in these vertical tubes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I got some basil there. Basil doesn't grow well out here. Basil likes a lot warmer climate. But I have a lot of peas started. Now, this is all real new. I mean, this is real new. In fact, it's still almost winter out here. Sage grows real well. Oregano grows real well. So I'm experimenting. What grows well? I'm also growing zinnias. The thing with these vertical tubes is they hang from my rafters because I want them up high so that people can see them from outside. Mm-hmm. But they have bases on them. And I call them patio farming because there's 2 different sizes, 4-inch PVC and 6-inch PVC. And they're not that heavy, but they're filled with soil. I'm not doing hydroponics. I like soil. I like living soil. Nutritious, dense, living soil creates, as far as I'm concerned, it creates better, more nutritious food, better tasting food. And there's a lot of studies to back that up. So I use soil. It's soil that I develop with the compost. I'm going to switch you back. So I think that's important. There's a big fad going on with indoor farming and, the electric lights and I like it. I mean, I have stuff growing in the house under LED lights. I have no big problem with that, but when they call it sustainable,
it's not.
I think I don't know what definition they have for the word sustainable. It's not sustainable.
It's certainly not even economically sustainable, really, to me, on a large scale.
Right.
let me build this very expensive device so the sun can fall on this device so I can power a light to do what the sun would do. But it's of course got tons of applications. I use lights as well. But yeah, I agree that like in the end, anything that complex is not a solution.
Yeah, and in some of the big operations, they literally have to bring in tanks of CO2 because it's depleted. So they have to manage the CO2 in these big vertical farms inside buildings. I don't want to get into the details on it. I like the technology. Dr. Bruce Bugbee from Utah State University is the NASA scientist that developed the LED lights for plants back in the 80s, specifically with the objective of going to Mars. That's why NASA hired him to do that. Okay. And you can search Bugbee, just like I said, Bugbee, I think it is, Dr. Bruce Bugbee, Utah State University. And I was his first student. So I'm back in 1982, he was a NASA scientist, but it was before the LED lights. So his research indicates it's 400% more energy inefficient to grow the plants under the lighting than to actually bring them from natural fields. So my approach is more about, let's improve the natural field approach. Yeah. Let's improve the natural approach. Let's use the biology approach more than the hydroponic approach. I do like aquaponics. So aquaponics is using the fish water with the fish waste in it. Oftentimes you filter out the solid waste. That's best in the home situation. Otherwise you need to do some additional planning. And you don't want to spray it on the leaves. You want to get it to the roots. But putting it into the soil is as old as the Aztec Indians, because they used to use aquaponics. And many researchers credit the Aztec Indians as the original regenerative farmers, it turns out. Another thing with my greenhouse, I'll turn this around here again. From a marketing point of view, it's raining outside, but not too heavy. Open my door here. What I do is I hang some of these vertical planters right off the outside of the greenhouse. Now I can't drive with them out there, but in the parking lot, it's certainly going to get more people's attention.
Yeah. Yeah, those visual cues kind of and like it's so cool that like your farm is literally just a self-driving marketing machine. You just can't not like when I saw it on Facebook, I had to know more. Like you can't see a truck with a greenhouse go by and plants hanging out the back and not need to know more about it. And I could see that the farmers market too, where it would just be so visible and stand out so much. And it's also really, it seems really accessible because like, and a greenhouse is one of the cheapest structures to build. And I'm sure you have to be a lot more sturdy and creative to build one on the back of a truck. But it still seems like it's not going to be a crippling expense. And you could find a used trailer or a beater truck to do it on.
Yeah, exactly. And I do reinforce the wood. I use 2x3s. And I reinforce it with angle steel. When I go to commercial production, I'll frame it in steel and welding. But you're right, it's not an expensive structure because the cover, by the way, the cover I use is a vinyl. It's a marine vinyl. Okay, so it's clear. Well, it's super hot. So I put on even 2 layers of shade cloth on the very top. So this marine vinyl is not a polychloride vinyl. It's called PIVA, and it's an acetate based vinyl. So the chloride is not a great thing when it gets heated up. So PVC has some challenges in that. It tells me it has a 10 to 20 year lifespan. So it's called marine vinyl, and it has a -40 degree crack rating. So it'll get down to 40 degrees before it'll crack.
Wow, that's great.
Now, I haven't tested this. I don't ever want to really be in a situation where I could test it.
Yeah, I don't want to be anywhere that's below 40 anyway. I'll leave that to the folks in Wyoming.
I had the wrong button pushed, so you were looking at black.
There we go. Now we see you.
Yeah, the folks in Wyoming, does it get minus 40 there?
It sure feels like it when I've been there.
I ain't going back.
That's
I went to school at Utah State, so that's my spring breaks would be going to the Tetons.
Oh, that's a beautiful area.
Yeah.
Well,
so have I covered a lot of stuff that caught your attention?
I think people are going to see this and get super inspired, and that's like, these are the solutions I'm really starting to want to cover on the channel. Recently we changed our channel name to Homestead for a Living with the idea like self-sufficiency means financial self-sufficiency too, especially now in a time where your compliance with medical mandates or whatever can get you fired from a job. And so we are all sprinting for not just food self-sufficiency and water self-sufficiency, but financial self-sufficiency. And a lot of people are just not going to be starting out from a like you said, like a great financial point where they can go buy that perfect 20-acre homestead. But I could also see somebody having money and wanting to do what you want to do, because a lot of people want to travel the world. They want to scratch a travel bug. They just want to try somewhere new, but maybe not move there. I can think of so many applications where this would be a good fit for somebody. And even they could completely do it in a totally different manner. You could incorporate it with some kind of food truck element, or you could, there's a ton of high value products you could be doing in a setup like that. I've even been seeing people bringing back like nomadic grazing, and it could really be incorporated well with that. I wish I could shout out his YouTube. I'll find his YouTube and I'll put it in this video. But there's a guy on YouTube that's doing that. He's got a wagon. It's not even a car, and his sheep actually pull the wagon, and he travels all over the country and just partners with farmers and grazes. So like, this is I think the 21st century version of nomadic farming. And in tumultuous times, I think nomadic cultures tend to do really well. It's like the people who stay in places and stick to places that may, like, we talk about the political situation being unstable in Oregon. Obviously, that's kind of a minor consideration now, but who knows, in 5 years, we could be in a lot more political turmoil. And so that could be a factor. The climate, we without going into reasons, the climate is changing in a lot of places because that's what climates do. Climates change. It's not a static thing. And so that could, you could also be established somewhere. Your family might have been there for 100 years growing corn, and suddenly you can't grow corn anymore. There's so many reasons why people might need to be mobile. And I really think what you've got there is a really cool example of a solution, and an accessible solution.
Yeah, it is. It's accessible. I live on I retired early, so I have to stretch out my money a lot further than I would have had I stayed with Morgan Stanley. Mm-hmm. Actually, if I had stayed with Morgan Stanley, I would have jumped. So I wouldn't have anything to worry about, unless I jumped from too short of a building and just broke my legs. So
yeah, you don't want to do that.
So, your mental health, your financial health, those are things that are important to consider, especially with your children. Mm-hmm. You guys are starting out. I don't know what your plans are, but a lot of young couples with kids, what better way to teach them the basics of science, the basics of producing things for a living? I mean, what an entrepreneurial spirit is going to develop from kids that are growing their own food, as opposed to kids that are, going to 7-Eleven for corn dogs. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm against corn dogs.
Oh, of course.
But the point is there's a self-esteem issue that comes from self-sufficiency, and that has a big impact. The other part is educational. In order to educate people, you got to get their attention. It's the same thing with marketing. Marketing is a form of educating. Mm-hmm. In order to get people, you need their attention capital.
Yeah.
And growing things.
I think we need capital for permaculture now. That's a great phrase, attention capital. That's like the main currency right now in the world.
Yeah, that's I think the most valuable capital is attention capital. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to come back.
Yeah.
There's another aspect to all that I'm doing, and it relates to my former career. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I've ever mentioned it to you, but crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, many people know of Indiegogo and Kickstarter. Those are donation types of funding.
Yeah.
Really, it's the same as passing the hat for a keg of beer. You know, the reward is you get beer.
Yeah.
You don't have to get a reward. People can just donate money. But there's another component to crowdfunding that I think is really valuable to young people, old people, young people of all ages. That's how I like to refer to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is equity crowdfunding. And that's a new form of crowdfunding. In fact, it's a new form of raising money for your business. And it changes, it provides an exemption from the 1934 law that really restricted your ability to raise capital in the form of investor capital. Crowdfunding, the donation, that's not even a retail transaction. That's just, that's First Amendment stuff. That's, you know, your basic freedom. It's freedom of speech. My speech might be, I'm going to donate $100 to this person because I like what they're doing. Mm-hmm. That's not a transaction. There's no, unless you go over like $13,000 in a calendar year, there's no tax related impact. Mm-hmm. With equity crowdfunding, it's a whole different story. Instead of going to the bankers and the lawyers, now I'm not saying you don't need a legal component to this, and you need to go through, to do equity crowdfunding, you need to go through what's called portals, which are just fancy websites designed to facilitate this type of financial transaction. Mm-hmm. And it's established in 2012, the Jobs Act of 2012, but it didn't get implemented until 2016, at least the parts that I'm talking about, which is Title III, which is regulation crowdfunding. Okay, that's what it's called now, regulation crowdfunding. You Google it. Mm-hmm. And Title IV, which is called Regulation A+. Under regulation crowdfunding, Title III, you can raise, well, initially in 2016, you could only raise $1 million in a calendar year. And there was a lot of restrictions. Now there's still restrictions, but there was a lot of onerous restrictions. And raising $1 million, what's that get you? That gets you a lot of headaches, a lot of work. And that's not really a lot of money if you're building a business and having employees and things like that. In last year, in March, I think it was March 15th, that $1 million was raised. Well, now, first off, it was indexed for inflation. So it was $1,070,000 last year. But it was raised to $5 million. Wow. Now, that's a huge impact. You can raise $5 million under regulation crowdfunding in a calendar year, in a 12-month period. I don't think it's a calendar year. I think it's a 12-month period. You need to work with a group that provides the legal basis, or a lawyer
that you know of that are like good ones for people to look at that would help them kind of. Are there good websites that you know of that like that offer like both the portal and like some of the legal services?
Yeah, I want to avoid recommending the portal. Okay. I'd encourage people to just start reading. There's a publication called Crowdfunder Insider. Mm-hmm. A lot of this is going on in Europe. Europe is ahead of us in a lot of ways. America, wake up. Europe's ahead of us in a lot of ways.
If I can be kind of if I can be like the 5-year-old that you're explaining it to, kind of, it's essentially not much different than like a Kickstarter or something, except that it's actual investment, right? People like anybody could invest because there's a lot of laws preventing anybody who wasn't kind of playing the game from accessing investors and doing this kind of like crowd-funded investment into your business. It's almost like a 21st century version of an IPO, right? Like people can actually.
Well, the Regulation A+ is literally, you can raise $75 million and basically you're taking your company public. You want to have an up and going company there. You need a lot of revenue to support the fact that you're going for that. You don't have to go for the 75 million. But let me address, it's an extremely complex issue, okay? funding your business. When Google was invested in, when Yahoo came around, all those high-tech companies, before 2016, there were no exemptions, okay? In order for you to even have the legal right, this is what's really hurt our country, in my opinion. This is one of the reasons I left the industry. I want to fight this. In order for you to have the legal right, you have to be called an accredited investor. That's what separates, those two words separate the banking class, the haves, from the rest of us, the have-nots. That's literally what Woody Guthrie was singing about when he wrote the song, "This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land." It was attacking the 1934 Act that established this accredited investor rule. You had to be a millionaire in order to even qualify to legally know about it. So if a company was raising money like Google and they went and told you, I don't know, I don't think you're a millionaire right now.
Well, no, no.
Okay. So if somebody from Google said to you, hey, we're raising money, that would disqualify Google from raising the money. It would be a violation of the Securities Act, and it would shut them down. If they were raising money, they'd have to give it back. Holy smokes, what are the, we're a classless society, except for if you happen to have $1 million, you're in the special class list part of the class,
I remember hearing this about it a few years ago, and it had kind of blown over my head. But hearing the way you're talking about, it seems like this is going to be so relevant right now, because I know all around me, especially like getting to know all the people within the homesteading space and doing stuff on YouTube, people are starting a lot of stuff right now because everyone's scrambling like you to make solutions. And I know people who are starting sawmills. I know people who are starting meat processing plants that are based on a PMA model to avoid the USDA. I know people that they're building schools, they're building so much, they're establishing so much so rapidly. And at the same time, you have a lot of people who maybe have some capital and they're looking around at the world saying, I don't want to hold on to cash. I don't want to hold on to stocks. I don't want my money in those places. And I don't even want necessarily like suburban or urban real estate. And so this might be a good pairing where people who have a cool idea and maybe access to an audience on YouTube or something, or they know somebody with an audience or an email list, and then somebody and a bunch of people with capital that want to put it in a safe place. This is a place where like finally a tyrannical law has been removed to allow this connection to happen. And so I think we'll have to do more conversations just about this topic alone, because I think this could be really important right now.
You summed it up expertly, so I think you know more about it than you're letting on there, because that was just perfect. Well,
I just like to be the 5-year-old in the conversation, like I just try to translate it into dummies.
Well, I'm not going to say that you're in the dummy section. You're exactly right. It gives the investor an opportunity and the company an opportunity. You can invest local. You can be investing in your local restaurants. You can be investing in your local sawmills, or you mentioned meat packing plants. Yeah. One of the big bugaboos is the big four meat packers. Everything has been consolidated. I'm 64. I know I look 63, but I'm 64. And in all my life, it's gotten more and more consolidated, our society, and that's what's constraining us. We need that free market opportunity where people with a few $100s or a few $1,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 that they want to put to work in something other than the bank, they can do this and help the community, help the startups, and they might hit a winner. Venture capitalists know. It's like if you're a good venture capitalist, 1 in 10 might be a winner, and that's if you're good. So you have to spread your coin around to a lot of spots. The thing is you can do that now.
That's awesome.
One step further, I did a lot of estate planning. How does grandma and grandpa take care of the grandkids and the great grandkids? What a great way to teach the grandkids and the kids about free market capitalism than to go out and look at a whole bunch of little companies and put 200 here, 200 there, 200 there, and then have kids' names or in a trust for the kids. That would be, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell people how to do it, but I can tell them how it works because I'm very well versed in this. So that it could be put into a trust where the kid owns it. So now the kid has a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old has a vested interest in those companies.
And they're accruing interest early in life and letting that exponential magic happen.
If that magic's going to happen, because this isn't in interest, this is value. This is value goes up. Now, that's because you own a piece of the company. If the company fails, then you own a piece of the failure.
Yeah, of course.
But if the company makes it, you own a piece of the making it. Now, it is very complex, and you need to understand the legal components, but many of the sites are providing those basics. And if you're a business going into it, you really want to do your homework for a while on this. Okay. Now you might, I'm not saying years, but you want to get around and look at how other companies have done it. And this is one of the things I want to bring to the market. Okay. It stopped raining. I'm going to show you how serious I am on this. I'm going to jump down. All right. This is the farm, by the way.
Beautiful.
Okay, I'm jumping. I hope I don't break anything, because I am 64.
Sounds like you're still alive.
I made it. I made it.
Sign there. That's just so eye-catching and really aesthetic, because if I try to build a greenhouse on a truck, it's probably going to look like a duct-taped mess, whereas that's like really aesthetic and just people would want to have that around.
I appreciate you saying that, because that's my goal, is to make it beautiful and attractive. Though having it so far up, so much of the light, it affects it. But I like the aesthetics, and then I make these signs. I'm a big sign maker. I love making signs. So the Mediterranean's herbs and spices, that's an old deck I cut down, a redwood deck that I took apart and bought a planer and table saw and sliced and diced. But here's what I wanted to show you. So over here I have the word crowdfunding, but this is the whole thing this is a big part of what to promote this regulation, equity crowdfunding. So I think it'll change people's lives. Mm-hmm. It'll change people's lives that are investors. It'll change people's lives that are starting up businesses that want to access equity capital. That means you're giving up a part of your company. Now you have to report to people. There's complexities that go with it.
Yeah, that may not be trying to start like a farm stand or a CSA. This is for like probably when you're ready for that next level, like retail location or a major website launcher. As you get into those upper echelons of your business after things are already have traction and rolling.
Yeah. However, so that's the equity side, but bonds are loans. So you can do a bond.
Oh, interesting.
And a bond, I'm not going to say that it will work, but it could work for a food stand. Because you could go to the bank and pay whatever the bank rates are, right? Mm-hmm. Or you could go to the market and offer less, maybe with some spiffs. Okay, spiffs being, hey, we'll give you a basket of vegetables every month.
Yeah, combine the CSA model with that. Oh my gosh, that's such a great idea.
Yeah, so now you have spiffs, just like in T-shirts and stuff when you were doing Kickstarter. Those are inducements to say, hey, give us some money. Well, you can do the same thing with equity crowdfunding. I got to turn this back here. So you can do the same thing with equity. It creates complexity, though. That creates a retail transaction, I believe. Okay, you can do it with bonds too. Again, it's creating a portion of that becomes a retail transaction, and you need to have a lawyer involved. But the people can put their money in the bank and get the low rate the bank's offering, so that they can loan the money out at a real high rate to the person who wants to start the food stand. Or you can have the money go directly to the food stand, take the banker out.
No middleman.
And have your income higher as the investor, You're assuming some risk, but your income's higher and the cost to the food stand is lower.
Yeah.
So part of it is you're taking the middleman out. Part of it is you're assuming some risk. But that's the American way.
Yeah. Well, then that's what guides a proper economy is people who actually what happens to our economy, I mean, to simplify a lot of stuff, is that we're so removed from risk. Interest rates aren't real. Our banking system isn't real. None of it is the way it would exist in a free market. When you remove the consequences for bad investment, that's when you get 2008. That's when you get what's about to happen now. It's like you remove the incentive to actually invest properly.
See, you are absolutely correct. Absolutely. That we've removed the risk, and therefore we remove you're going to be a lot more diligent about somebody doing a food stand than you're going to be about choosing your bank.
Something else you said earlier about this that stuck with me was like, talking about like investing in local businesses. That would make, if you're somebody who's like, you're settled in the area where you want to raise your children and want to be for the rest of your life, it makes so much sense to be putting the money into your neighbors' businesses. They're obviously going to be loyal to you and you're boosting your whole economy. Like, we kind of have this agritourism component we may start to incorporate over time. And so if we're boosting other agritourisms or wineries or places that are going to draw people from Nashville to our area, then we're not only making money on our investment, we're building up our entire economy significantly. Like you could really do a local drive, draw locals people's attention to this ability to crowdfund equity and change a rural area, like especially in economically depressed rural areas. Like this, I can't believe I didn't think of all this when I remember hearing about this a few years ago. So I'm so glad that you made this so like in such common sense terms, because I think it's a massive game changer.
It is, and there's a reason you don't hear about it. The big banks, the big corporations, they like to keep you under their control. We'll take care of the risk. I'll tell you what, you learn a lot more about everything if you participate in the risk, number one. And number two, what you just described about putting the money in locally and stuff, you can throw the word community in there. You're building back the community. You're a heck of a lot more interested. Your kids will be a lot more interested. Everybody's going to be more engaged and respectful of each other. And recognize the community, just like the old movie It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. That local bank, and that's why they've gotten rid of all the local. And I'm real glad that you like this part of the discussion. Hey, can I give me a little plug?
Absolutely. That was going to be my next question. I want to know where to send people, because I know you have some oh, awesome. So they can text you for a video link. That's a great idea.
So this is on the back end of the truck. So people call me up. Well, I ask them to text because, who wants to answer the phone if you don't know who it is? And I'm getting calls as I drive around town. So that's a great way to reach me. And then I'm also on Rumble. I have what I call the Mobile Farm Show. So on rumble.com, it's called Mobile Farm Show, all strung together.
We'll put a video too when I post this on YouTube. We'll make sure there's a link. People can go check it out.
Oh, cool. So this is great. I hope this is the first of other conversations. I think what you guys are doing is great.
I was just going to say, like, we have way more conversations we need to have, because I know we haven't touched on, and I don't want to give people too much, but like I know you're starting to do some things with educational components and even bringing music into that. And so we obviously, we might just have to do this bi-weekly or something, because I feel like each one of these things still deserves more in-depth conversation, like the mobile farming aspect, maybe the nitty-gritty of how to build something like that. And then obviously the equity crowdfunding just needs to be explored in depth. I think we need to do a whole discussion on that and bring more folks into that. But I feel like we've probably given everyone a lot to think about and hopefully blown a few minds with some cool ideas.
Well, you had asked about specific portals. If we have a chance to go down the road and I can kind of get people a foundation, then I will be happy to I'll reference specific portals, and I'm researching them.
Awesome.
So it's important to people to understand the responsibility comes on your shoulders. So the loss comes to you, and you can't go whining to the bank about it. So it's not for everybody. The whiners stay home.
Yeah.
But for the people that really have the confidence in their own ability to succeed, this is a game changer. And the big banks, the securities industry, they have fought to keep this from coming out. And that's why so few people hear about it. Even just doing Google searches, you hardly come up with, here's an article written 2 years ago. It's like everything's old. So you can be a portal for the education.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I think we're going to need to start a lot of folks is education. So yeah, let's definitely just go ahead and plan on another video where we'll just deep dive into just this topic. I think there's a lot of people I know on this channel who are really starting to make moves into establishing businesses. And I also know we have people on this channel who are, retirees or boomers or folks who've done well in life and are looking for safe haven asset kind of investments. So I think this is going to be really relevant to this audience. So we'll definitely have to deep dive way more into this. I'm super excited about it.
When I was a kid, it was, as the statement was, that's as American as apple pie. Mm-hmm. Well, getting rid of the bankers and the lawyers, that's as American as you can't as apple pie now.
I love that idea. Well, we'll as we wrap up this video, we'll of course just stay on this Zoom call. We'll just probably set another meeting because I know everyone's gonna want to hear that next step, that next like upper level. We'll really nerd out into the financial stuff. But anything else, anywhere else you want to send people or where they can follow what you're doing? Just Rumble is the best way.
Yeah, the text to the phone number and Rumble is the best way. I used to have a GoDaddy website. I came to despise GoDaddy. They couldn't perform. They kept saying that they were doing the work and it wasn't getting done. Very frustrating with technology for us old folks.
It's frustrating for us young folks too. So
well, that's nice to hear.
I'm fighting it every day.
I really appreciate you reaching out. And I've enjoyed having coffee with you this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, everyone else, as you're watching this, stay tuned, and we will definitely have more of these conversations. CJ's got a lot of cool things to bring to the table, and it's a time of solution. A time of a tumultuous time is a time to create solutions, and he's creating a lot of solutions and researching them, and I think it's just going to lead to some cool conclusions. So for everyone on the video watching, we'll see you next time, and stay safe, be well, and happy homesteading.